Seb, listen, we're just going to start with a nice easy one, because just the reflections of where we are. You and I have spoken enough at Olympic Games and at World Championships over the years. The last few days, there was fatigue, doubtless, but I suppose just from your point of view, athletics, whether the IOC like it or not, it's the number one sport. It's the global sport. So your reflections on the meet so far?
We're in great shape in athletics. We're on a couple of days to go. Every session's been a full house from morning through to end of play, and that's a good thing. We've seen some performances that have been for the ages from our athletes. Sydney McLaughlin last night smashing the world record, and Femke Bol is one of the best athletes of her generation, and so that was an extraordinary win. We've seen a 1500 metres that would have graced the table at any Olympic Games that I can remember. And I think the interesting thing for me about our sport at the moment is that, if we're being open about it, a few years ago we were the sport about one person. And we've now got a range of athletes, both on the track and in the field, that are just extraordinary. If you look at Mondo Duplantis, you look at Nafi Tiam, who is going to have to work hard with KJT in the field, but we've got some of the athletes that are really playing at the top of their game.
We'll delve in if you may, and I will come back to you specifically about the 1500. Obviously there's clearly a British angle in it for us on that one. 100 metre final and Noah Lyles. Let's chat Noah Lyles. Let's first of all, before we get to last night, I've kind of seen lots of headlines translated back into English, greatest 100 metre final ever. And initially I was going, really? But then you look back at it and you go, well, so no better person to ask.
I'm always loath to ever use the word greatest. I
thought you might be. Yeah.
Well, I cut my teeth journalistically years ago and had a sports editor that used to routinely put a blue felt tip pen through the word greatest or very unique. I mean, he was quite a hard taskmaster, and when I'd say greatest, he'd say, what, you've seen them all? But I think you have to say it's up there. A couple of thousandths determining it, and Noah he was never ahead in that race until the last literally the last frame on the photo finish. And yeah, look, if you look at the times, 8 athletes, I think, well under 10 seconds. Yes, it's the fastest race. Was it the best spectacle? I think it was pretty tasty, but you've got to go back to Carl Lewis, you're going back to Jesse Owens, you're going back to Valery Bortsov in 72. I mean, we've seen Jim Hines, people like that, late 60s. We've seen some extraordinary performances, but no, I think you have to say that was one for the history books.
Just on Noah, he's almost seen as one of the poster boys. He's clearly one of the poster boys for Team USA. Listen, I know it's not your job with what happened last night, but questions being, he tested for COVID and he's able to be there. I know it's not your decision, but I suppose the question to me to you is, how did you feel?
Look, there's always a balance, isn't there? 3 years ago, 2 years ago, you'd have probably, we had systems and, protocols that probably would have meant he wasn't actually even allowed to stay in the village. We've all got calmer about it. And I'm going to leave that for others, to be honest. I'm probably sidestepping the question because it wasn't a decision we had to make. It was very much an issue for the medical teams, the local organising committee, and of course the International Olympic Committee and the USOC. But yeah, that's where we've got to.
Let's stay international. You mentioned him, Armand Duplantis. One of the things that's done as the way it is these days, social media focuses on. It wasn't necessarily him breaking his own world record, 6:25. It was the celebrations after. Good old passionate embrace with the girlfriend, and then a punching match with his mate in the Swedish team. But regardless of that, you mentioned there athletics has been about one person. Previously, Usain Bolt, you've always talked about Duplantis and the way that he could do things.
He's a rock star.
Yeah, there we go.
And that is important. And look, he has the same extraordinary and crucial asset, and it's a good asset to have. He has exactly the same quality as Noah Lyles, and it's not just about performance, it's also about personality. But there is another asset too, that when they're under pressure, they always find a way of winning. And look, Noah found a way. He didn't come out of the heat or the semi, in definitive fashion. I've seen him run better, but when it really mattered, he found a way of winning. Mondo, I've seen under pressure, they find a way of winning. And that's great. And the important thing is that we want longevity here. It's great to have the magnesium flair, but you also want them to be there in 4 years' time. You want them to be there ideally in 8 years' time. And with this current generation, we've now got an opportunity, and I know it because I'm here. I've got kids around the place who sort of bump into me when I'm sort of walking into the stadium, young people who are talking about Noah Lyles, they're talking about Mondo, they're talking about Sydney. They see these guys now as very cool.
Do you think you've come through the loss of Usain Bolt? Because you were very honest. You said it's going to be a challenge.
And you don't replace Usain Bolt. You don't replace Muhammad Ali. When Muhammad Ali went, there was never going to be another Muhammad Ali. But you did have great boxers that came on. What we've got now is we've got great athletes. They're young. They can be there for a long time. Kerr-Ingebrigtsen is 22, for goodness sake. She could be there for another 8 years. And that's going to be a huge asset for British athletics and global athletics. So we want them to be there, we want them to be recognised, and we want them out competing on a regular basis. And all those three do. They really do commit to our sport.
Indulge me if you may on Team GB. We'll talk about Keely in a minute, but can I bring how much are you loving, if loving is the right word, the relationship between Josh Kerr and Ingebrigtsen? Because that brought people to athletics who may not have come to athletics, and the fact that Kerr and Ingebrigtsen neither backed down and both kind of loved it.
I'm trying hard not to overcomplicate this, and I don't think it is. Give me rivalries and give me grit, and you've got both. And look, they don't much like each other. I don't think that is. I'm not breaking any great confidence. No. I'm not breaking any great confidences here. I'm probably understating it, if anything. And I don't think that's been a bad thing. It's not disfiguring. It's not damaging the sport, but it is bringing people to a sport that see that the competitors, are very, very passionate about what they do. And goodness me, we've all been in the workplace where there are people we just don't take to, and that's clearly what has happened here.
Just on Josh Kerr, you've run. Well, you are a 1500 metre Olympic champion yourself. Just on his performances, we've spoken to him a couple of times. Spoke to him, I think, the morning afterwards. We've spoken to him again today, a bit more considered as well. But surely he's clearly got what it takes to be an Olympic champion and go further. That's the whole point. Is when he now has to find a way of going quicker and different styles of race management. But from what you've seen, has he got all the ingredients?
Absolutely, he's the real deal, and he will find a way of winning. I sat with Kerr-Ingebrigtsen a year ago in Budapest. She was disappointed, which was a good thing. You shouldn't be too, complacent and comfortable with a silver medal. Now, there are some people that will go, in fairness, that will leave these championships in lots of sports that will think a silver medal surpassed any level of expectation. Keely went to Budapest last year wanting to win, and she wasn't satisfied. And I said to her at the time, look, I actually said to her at the time, I'm going to pick your event to give the medals in because I think you'll come back and win. And, she found a way of winning, and she found a way of winning through focusing between Budapest and Paris and all the things she's done in training. I don't know what she's done in training, but my goodness, it does seem to have worked.
Trevor Painter and Jenny Meadows have a way, don't they, with
Yeah,
Keegan
and they
one,
do,
yeah.
and they understand the distance. And Jenny is, is a very accomplished competitor, and that's a really good thing to have, because it's not just about imparting technical information and anaerobic thresholds and interval training. It's also about managing expectations around major championships. The jump between a one-day meeting and a championship here is massive. People don't always recognise that. It's like going from it's like going from county cricket to test cricket. It's like playing in the championship and ending up in your national team. It's a massive jump. Some like that, some relish it, and the championship environment is really what excites them. They wake up in a championship year knowing it's a different type of year. Others perform better on a one-off basis. Keighley was put on this planet to be in a championship environment.
Can I switch now to you? You've said last term for you as president of World Athletics. I remember that day in Beijing. I can't remember how long ago that was.
It's 2015.
2015 when you took over the baton.
Yeah.
Definitely your last term. Have you done everything that you want to do?
Oh, it's definitely my last term. We changed the rules.
Just checking, because sometimes the rules can be changed.
No, we're not that type of sport, and it will be my last term, and that's the way it should be. And I hope I'm going to leave the sport in good shape. I've still got 3 years. A lot of ground still to cover. We've got the World Athletics Ultimate Championships in Budapest in 2 years' time. That's a different type of World Championships. We've got a lot of innovation to do around the product. What is exciting? What do we need to work on? Loads of things still to do. But no, this is my last term.
What about the IOC? What about your future? Any future ambition to lead that organisation? Because you've led the major international federation. You know the workings of the IOC.
Look, I don't know whether there's a vacancy. At this moment, we're all sort of, not sure what direction it will go in. Maybe that becomes apparent sooner rather than later. It may not. And I'm not really that good at sitting there trying to do the what ifs, particularly in a championship where I'm working long hours. So let's just see how that plays out. But look, I've been involved with the movement for a larger part of my life. I joined an athletics club at the age of 11. I was lucky enough, privileged enough to get into an Olympic arena twice. I've chaired an organising committee for a Games, and I'm chairing the #1 Olympic sport. So yeah, clearly I've thought about it.
Just on another thing, we touched it on your opening press conference, and I'm not going to ask you a direct question about the spat between the IBA and the IOC, but it's just your position, I suppose, with when you can look for a position with your argument, from your position, where you've had arguments about eligibility, you've made your case, you've been in the courts, and you have a position. This whole
seem to have spent a lot of time in my presidency in the courts,
yes.
fighting for one thing or another.
Yeah. How have you felt looking on at the various arguments that have reared their head here in Paris because of the eligibility round within boxing? Boxing is a weird sport. There's some special measures.
Yeah,
no
it is. And Garen, I'm not going to get into the nooks and crannies of this, and it's really not for me to do that. What I would say is it's pretty apparent to me that you need a policy. We crafted a policy in World Athletics. We were very clear, and I'm very clear that I'm elected to do some things that are very clearly mandated, and one is to preserve the female category. What does that mean in simple terms? It's to make sure that we maintain the integrity of competition. And if you don't, then it's a very simple concept. No woman will ever win another sporting event. And that's not where I want athletics to be. Are women a box office? in many cases, they have actually kept the sport together during, difficult times. You've only got to see what they're doing in this stadium here. And this is something I believe very strongly in. And if you have a policy, which we have, and you're never going to please everybody because it's a sensitive subject, I recognise that. You're never going to please everybody, but you do have to put the flagpole down somewhere and say, this is the line, and stick to it. Don't get distracted by dissenting voices, because there'll always be those dissenting voices, and communicate it properly to the athletes. And if you don't, then you end up in the territory that we're in here.
I think my 15 minutes will be up soon, Seb. So indulge me. We've used a couple of cricketing analogies. You may do the proverbial forward defensive on this one. Just wanted to ask you. You do chair a task force that's in the northwest of England at the moment, Manchester United.
Yeah, very pleased to be doing that.
How realistic is it, the preferred option that you've put out on the table? I know you're not reporting back until later in the year.
No, look, there are lots of possibilities on the table, and it's a stakeholder board. So I've got people like Andy Burnham, who's a great mayor of Manchester, and other elected officials, the universities. It's a proper board, and we're not just looking at the viability of a football stadium. That's important. But in a way, it takes me back to the London Olympic years, because I know that a sporting venue, properly structured and with thought and drive behind it, can transform local communities. And that's why I was attracted when Jim asked me to do it. So we're working through that, and it's really important we really understand the potential here. And in a way, there are many of those other judgments are for the football club. But what I think we can get to is a regeneration project that is worthy of its name and could easily be the largest regeneration project in Europe.